Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's longtime business partner and one of the most rational and successful investors in human history, once made a remark that sounds almost crude on the surface, but is profoundly accurate the moment you live through it. He said, "The first $100,000 is a bitch, but you gotta do it. Not difficult, not challenging, not inconvenient, a bitch. A word that implies grind, frustration, unfairness, and emotional resistance. And when a man who spent decades calmly compounding billions chooses that word, it's worth paying attention. Because the phrase isn't just about money, it's about psychology, time, discipline, and surviving a phase of life where effort and reward are wildly out of proportion. If you're currently working toward your first serious investing milestone, you already understand this on a visceral level. You don't need theory, you don't need motivation quotes. You feel it every month when the money leaves your account. You've been investing for a few years now, maybe 3, maybe 4. You're putting in $500 a month, sometimes more, sometimes less, and $500 isn't nothing. It's groceries, it's car payments, it's experiences you don't have. It's saying no while other people say yes. You're making real trade-offs, not hypothetical ones. You're delaying gratification in a world that constantly tells you gratification is the point of life. You open your brokerage account and you see a number like $42,000 or $55,000 or $68,000. And intellectually, you know that's progress. You know it's more than most people have. You know you should be proud. But emotionally, it feels underwhelming. It feels small relative to the sacrifice. And then you do the math. At this pace, you won't hit 100,000 for years, maybe 4 more, maybe 5, and suddenly 7 years of effort for a 6-figure balance doesn't feel inspiring, it feels exhausting. This is where doubt creeps in. You start comparing your life to the lives of people around you, friends who don't invest at all, co-workers who lease new cars, take expensive vacations, upgrade apartments, eat out without thinking twice. They seem lighter, freer, less burdened by long-term thinking. You know logically that many of them will pay for this later. You know that future versions of them may struggle, but right now they're enjoying themselves, and you're staring at a number that moves slowly, almost mockingly slowly, no matter how disciplined you are. What almost no one tells you is that this feeling of futility is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. It's the emotional cost of being in the most unrewarding phase of an exponential process. Because on the other side of $100,000 is a completely different mathematical and psychological reality, one that most people never experience precisely because they give up before reaching it. Compound interest is one of the most misunderstood forces in personal finance, not because people don't know the definition, but because they don't internalize how it actually behaves over time. Everyone has heard the explanation. Your money earns returns, and then those returns earn returns, and eventually it snowballs. But knowing that in theory is very different from living through the early years of it in practice. Compound growth is exponential, and exponential functions behave in ways that feel deeply unnatural to the human brain. We evolved to think linearly. We expect proportional effort to produce proportional results. Save more, get a little more. Work harder, progress steadily. But exponential growth doesn't reward you steadily. It delays reward and then delivers it all at once. At the beginning, compound interest is almost invisible. It exists mathematically, but emotionally, it might as well not exist at all. Your portfolio grows almost entirely because of your contributions, not because of the market. Every dollar of progress feels like it came directly from your paycheck. The market's role feels negligible, and that's because at low balances, it is negligible. This is the flattest part of the curve, where the line barely slopes upward. You're pushing, but nothing seems to move. This is why the first $100,000 feels so brutal, not because saving $100,000 is inherently harder than saving the next $100,000, but because during the first phase, you are doing almost all the work yourself. The math isn't helping you yet. In fact, it almost feels like it's working against you because the gains are too small to feel motivating. You're putting in thousands per year and watching the market give you a few hundred in return. It feels insulting. It feels pointless. It feels like the system is broken. But the system isn't broken. It's just slow to start. To understand why, it helps to look at actual numbers rather than vague promises. Imagine you start from zero and invest $500 a month into a broad market index fund, earning an average of 10% annually. That's $6,000 a year, consistently, without fail. To go from zero to $100,000 under those conditions takes roughly 7 years and 5 months. That's 89 months of showing up, of transferring money, of staying invested through market noise, of resisting the urge to quit when progress feels invisible. Over that entire period, your total contributions amount to around $44,500. The remaining $55,500 comes from investment gains. Notice what that means. Even after more than 7 years, you are still responsible for nearly half of the result. Your effort and the market's effort are roughly equal. Compound interest is helping, but it's not carrying you. You're still pushing the flywheel almost entirely on your own. Now compare that to what happens next. Going from 100,000 to 200,000 under the same assumptions takes roughly 3 years and 8 months, less than half the time. During that period, your contributions total roughly $22,000, but your investment gains amount to around $78,000. Your money is now doing more than 3 times the work you are. The math has flipped. The same behavior produces dramatically different results, not because you changed anything, but because you crossed a threshold where compounding finally has enough mass to work with. And the acceleration doesn't stop there. The next $100,000 takes even less time. Going from 200,000 to 300,000 takes about 2 years and 7 months. From 300 to 400, around 2 years. By the time your portfolio is approaching $900,000, adding another $100,000 takes barely more than a year. The same $100,000 that once demanded nearly a decade of sacrifice now appears in 13 months, not because you became smarter, not because you worked harder, but because you stayed long enough for the curve to bend upward. This is the magic everyone talks about, but very few people ever experience, because the magic only shows up after years of monotony. It only appears after you've already proven discipline without external validation, and most people don't last that long. Look at the experience year by year. In your very first year of investing $500 a month, you contribute $6,000. At a 10% return, your average balance during that year is low, so your total investment gains might be around $300. $300, that's it. You did 95% of the work. The market barely showed up. Of course, it feels discouraging. Of course, it feels like nothing is happening. Fast forward to year 10, your portfolio is now around $100,000. At that point, a 10% return produces roughly $10,000 in gains in a single year. You still contribute $6,000, but now your money is doing more than you are. The relationship has changed. In year 20, with a portfolio around $340,000, your annual gains approximate $34,000. You contribute $6,000. Your money is nearly 6 times the work you are. By year 30, with a portfolio exceeding $1 million, your annual gains surpass $100,000. At that point, you could stop contributing entirely, and your wealth would still grow faster than your salary ever did. But here's the uncomfortable truth Charlie Munger understood deeply. You cannot skip to year 30. You cannot shortcut to the phase where the math carries you. You must earn the right to compound by surviving the years when it barely exists. The first $100,000 is hard, not because it requires extreme intelligence or perfect market timing, but because it requires faith in a process that does not reward you immediately. And humans are terrible at sustaining effort without immediate feedback. This is where psychology becomes more important than math. After you cross $100,000, something fundamental shifts in how investing feels. Before that point, the numbers feel abstract. $20,000 feels like an emergency fund. $40,000 feels like a down payment someday.
But $100,000 feels substantial. It feels like capital. It feels like something that can grow on its own. Market movements start to matter in a way they never did before. A 2% gain on $20,000 is $400. That's nice, but forgettable. A 2% gain on $100,000 is $2,000. That's rent. That's a vacation. That's real money. You start to viscerally feel your money working for you, and that feeling reinforces the behavior that created it. Motivation becomes internal rather than forced. Perhaps most importantly, reaching $100,000 proves something to yourself that no spreadsheet ever can. It breaks the belief that wealth building is something reserved for other people, for the lucky, for the privileged, for the financially gifted. When you hit six figures, you have concrete evidence that you can accumulate